born December 16, 1775. Steventon Rectory, Hampshire, England. Died July 18, 1817, aged 41. Winchester, Hampshire, England. Resting place Winchester Cathedral, Hampshire, England. Education Reading Abbey Girls' School. Period 1787 to 1809 to 11. Relatives: Edward Austen Knight, brother. Henry Thomas Austen, brother. Cassandra Austen, sister. Sir Francis Austen, aka Francis, brother. Charles Austen, brother. Eliza de Filide, cousin. Signature from Austen's 1817 will. Jane Austen, /Stn, s/, December 16, 1775, July 18, 1817, was an English novelist known primarily for her 6 major novels, which interpret, critique and comment upon the British landed gentry at the end of the 18th century. Austen's plots often explore the dependence of women on marriage in the pursuit of favorable social standing and economic security. Her works critique the novels of sensibility of the second half of the 18th century and are part of the transition to 19th century literary realism. Her use of biting irony, along with her realism, humor, and social commentary, have long earned her acclaim among critics, scholars, and popular audiences alike. Biographical sources. Last page of letter from Austen to her sister, Cassandra, June 11, 1799. There is little biographical information about Jane Austen's life except the few letters that survive and the biographical notes her family members wrote. During her lifetime, Austen may have written as many as 3,000 letters, but only 161 survived. Many of the letters were written to Austen's older sister Cassandra, who in 1843 burned the greater part of them and cut pieces out of those she kept. Ostensibly, Cassandra destroyed or censored her sister's letters to prevent their falling into the hands of relatives and ensuring that younger nieces did not read any of Jane Austen's sometimes acid or forthright comments on neighbors or family members. Cassandra believed that in the interest of tact and Jane's penchant for forthrightness, these details should be destroyed. The paucity of record of Austen's life leaves modern biographers little with which to work. The situation was compounded as successive generations of the family expunged and sanitized the already opaque details of Austen's biography. The heirs of Jane's brother, Admiral Francis Austen, destroyed more letters, details were excised from the biographical notice her brother wrote in 1818, and family details continued to be omitted or embellished in her nephew's A Memoir of Jane Austen, published in 1869, and in William and Richard Arthur Austen Lee's biography Jane Austen, Her Life and Letters, published in 1913. The legend the family and relatives created reflects their biases in favor of good quiet Aunt Jane, portraying a woman whose domestic situation was happy and whose family was the mainstay of her life. Austen scholar Jan Fergus explains that modern biographies tend to include details excised from the letters and family biographical materials, but that the challenge is to avoid the polarizing view that Austen experienced periods of deep unhappiness and was an embittered, disappointed woman trapped in a thoroughly unpleasant family. Jane Austen was born in Steventon, Hampshire, on December 16, 1775. She was born a month later than her parents expected. Her father wrote of her arrival in a letter that her mother certainly expected to have been brought to bed a month ago. He added that her arrival was particularly welcome as a future companion to her sister. The winter of 1776 was particularly harsh, and it was not until 5 April that she was baptized at the local church with the single name Jane. For much of Jane's life, her father, George Austen, 1731 to 1805, served as the rector of the Anglican parishes at Steventon and at nearby Dean. He came from an old, respected, and wealthy family of wool merchants. Over the centuries, as each generation of eldest sons received inheritances, their wealth was consolidated, and George's branch of the family fell into poverty. He and his two sisters were orphaned as children and had to be taken in by relatives. His sister Philadelphia went to India to find a husband, and George entered St. John's College, Oxford on a fellowship, where he most likely met Cassandra Lee, 1739 to 1827. She came from the prominent Lee family. Her father was rector at All Souls College, Oxford, where she grew up among the gentry. Her eldest brother James inherited a fortune and large estate from his great-aunt Perrott, with the only condition that he change his name to Lee Perrott. Steventon Church, as depicted in a memoir of Jane Austen. George and Cassandra exchanged miniatures in 1763 and probably were engaged around that time. George received the living for the Steventon parish from the wealthy husband of his second cousin, Thomas Knight, who owned Steventon and its associated farms, one of which the Austen family rented to live in. 2 months after Cassandra's father died, they married on April 26, 1764 at St. Swithin's Church in Bath, by license, in a simple ceremony. They left for Hampshire the same day. Their income was modest, with George's small per annum living. Cassandra brought to the marriage the expectation of a small inheritance at the time of her mother's death. The Austens took up temporary residence at the nearby Dean Rectory until Steventon, a 16th-century house in disrepair, underwent necessary renovations. Cassandra gave birth to 3 children while living at Dean: James in 1765, George in 1766, and Edward in 1767. Her custom was to keep an infant at home for several months and then place it with Elizabeth Littlewood, a woman living nearby, to nurse and raise for 12 to 18 months. 24 According to Honan, the atmosphere of the Austen home was an open, amused, easy intellectual one, where the ideas of those with whom the Austens might disagree politically or socially were considered and discussed. The family relied on the patronage of their kin and hosted visits from numerous family members. Cassandra Austen spent the summer of 1770 in London with George's sister, Philadelphia, and her daughter Eliza, accompanied by his other sister, Mrs. Walter, and her daughter Philly. Philadelphia and Eliza Hancock were, according to Lafay, the bright comets flashing into an otherwise placid solar system of clerical life in rural Hampshire, and the news of their foreign travels and fashionable London life, together with their sudden descents upon the Steventon household in between times, all helped to widen Jane's youthful horizon and influence her later life and works. Education. Silhouette of Cassandra Austen, Jane's sister and closest friend. In 1783, Austen and her sister Cassandra were sent to Oxford to be educated by Mrs. Anne Cawley, who took them with her to Southampton when she moved there later in the year. In the autumn both girls were sent home when they caught typhus and Austen nearly died. Austen was from then home educated, until she attended boarding school in Reading with her sister from early in 1785 at the Reading Abbey Girls' School, ruled by Mrs. Latournelle, who possessed a cork leg and a passion for theatre. The school curriculum probably included some French, spelling, needlework, dancing and music and, perhaps, drama. The sisters returned home before December 1786 because the school fees for the 2 girls were too high for the Austen family. After 1786, Austen never again lived anywhere beyond the bounds of her immediate family environment. The remainder of her education came from reading, guided by her father and brothers James and Henry. Irene Collins believes that Austen used some of the same school books as the boys her father tutored. Austen apparently had unfettered access both to her father's library and that of a family friend, Warren Hastings. Together these collections amounted to a large and varied library. Her father was also tolerant of Austen's sometimes risque experiments in writing, and provided both sisters with expensive paper and other materials for their writing and drawing. When Austen became an aunt for the first time at age 18, she sent newborn niece Fanny Catherine Austen Knight 5 short pieces of the juvenilia now known collectively as scraps, purporting to be her opinions and admonitions on the conduct of young women. For niece Jane Anna Elizabeth Austen, also born in 1793, Jane Austen wrote 2 more miscellaneous morsels, dedicating them to on June 2, 1793, convinced that if you seriously attend to them, you will derive from them very important instructions, with regard to your conduct in life. There is manuscript evidence that Austen continued to work on these pieces as late as 1811, when she was 36, and that her niece and nephew, Anna and James Edward Austen, made further additions as late as 1814. Between 1793 and 1795, aged 18 to 20, Austen wrote Lady Susan, a short epistolary novel, usually described as her most ambitious and sophisticated early work. It is unlike any of Austen's other works. Austen biographer Claire Tomalin describes the novella's heroine as a sexual predator who uses her intelligence and charm to manipulate, betray and abuse her lovers, friends and family. Tomalin writes,